I've seen you perform and you have so much grace and everything just flows on stage. But obviously, that is the work uh,
Right.
uh, behind it. But
Yeah.
what if, like, I've always been curious, like, what if you've had mentally a bad day, you've had an argument with someone, or the vibe just isn't right?
Yeah.
And then physically, like, what if you feel a little bit off? You have a headache, you have your period.
Yeah.
Um, how do you get out of that funk and and give your best self on stage?
Sometimes like that you're just having a bad day. And I think the only thing that kind of helps me take like get out of it is like not wanting to bring my colleagues into my own drama. And so like there's kind of this like unspoken rule. I guess obviously some days are worse than others and you can't like you're human, you can't leave it at the door, but I think we all try and just leave our baggage at the door. And I think by forcing like thinking about other people and being like, okay, I don't want to bring them into my negativity, that kind of forces me out of it. But like physically, sometimes you just like you're tired, you're sore, dealing with an injury, and you have a performance, especially when we're on tour and you're doing show after show. And it's just sometimes you have a bad show and there's no like there's nothing that you like you try or you just keep getting distracted on stage. Definitely music helps. I just like take some time, listen to music, close my eyes. Yeah, take space, like get yourself like a cookie, like I reward myself with chocolate and like it's
Yeah,
gonna be
chocolate cures everything.
yeah. You know, or just like, okay, I'll get through the show and I can have a beer at the end, like something that's just like,
Mhm.
yeah. But it's hard because like maybe for other people, like they have a bad day, you know, you leave the office, you leave it behind or whatever, but like people are looking at you while you have your bad day.
Exactly. And judging you
Yeah,
and
exactly.
writing reviews.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard, but sometimes it's like it's you know you use it, and sometimes it's like fueled me to be like, oh, I'm angry, like this is not working out, and then you're just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna just do it, and that kind of helps you overcome the yeah
Mhm. Well, I
yeah
saw an interview with you where you said sometimes conflict is good in that it gives you a spark.
it's true yeah definitely it's yeah I've definitely had to do that like with my injury and just like
Mhm.
relationships and things like that, and you're just like, okay, you know what, sometimes you need that extra little push. And yeah, it's not always good to be comfortable.
Sometimes we just you lose that little edge that makes you spectacular, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So is there ever any time where you are the choreography of a piece is so internalized that you can be this other Livona on stage and actually think of like, what do I need uh, at the grocery store? You know, am I missing milk at home?
Oh,
I mean, do you ever have those thoughts, or are you always like so focused on the performance, or
yeah. No,
does
I
your
know what you're
mind actually wander?
um I haven't I haven't had that as far as where I can think about something else, but I have had moments where I'm like, what did I just do? Like when you're driving home and you're like, how did I get home? I don't remember turning down the street, but I'm not, yeah, I haven't gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about dinner and while I'm doing it, blah, blah, blah. But there have been gaps where I've been like, oh God, I gotta like focus a little more because I can't remember what I like just did, or like you kind of zone out and you like stop counting, or you miss your entrance or something. Like I find that actually happens more when I'm off stage, like waiting to go back on or watching
The
from off stage.
cueing.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm
Okay.
just like, oh shit, I missed my entrance. I think that's only happened maybe once. But like you're just like so engaged in what's happening, and then you forget that you're actually in the piece.
Gosh,
But,
I'm sure that's frightening
yeah.
if that happens. It's like,
Yeah.
oops.
But it's funny that you say groceries, because there was a performance where my colleague like accidentally hit me on the head with his knee, and I blacked out, and I came to, and I was thinking about my grocery list, and I was like, where am I? And then I like started dancing while I was figuring out where I was, like just because my body like knew what was happening, and then like the pain started to kick in, and then I was like, uh-oh, and I had to run off stage, and like I realized like, oh, I've been hit.
Oh my God. So what happens then?
People just like fill in for you. So like that I had a duet, someone else went on, someone continued as a solo, and like meanwhile my director was like coming from the audience to check on me, and like the nurse came, and yeah, it was
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
Oh, that sounds so scary.
Yeah, but it was kind of, now it's a fun
On multiple levels scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you learn choreography, you're learning multiple parts for
Yes.
that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in a smaller company, we're learning, as many parts. You're always keeping an eye. Like usually there's definitely, you have a second cast or understudy, but you're always keeping your eye on other things so that you can kind of jump in. And
how do you remember it all?
Yeah. I don't know, just muscle memory, and like we do it so many times. It just it's in there. Yeah. And then
because sometimes there's not even music to help cue you, right?
Yeah. You kind of just have to like connect it to something, imagery in your brain or something, and then just like the sheer repetition, it really just like, I don't know, there's some pieces that the music will come on and like it's been 5 years, I'm like, oh, I still remember it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I'd
Yeah.
love to have that sort of memory. I once took a dance class, a mom and daughter class, who took when Jasmine was quite young.
Yeah.
And it was like J-Lo.
Oh my God, yes.
And I was, of course, I had to go in the back row, right? Because number one, I have 2 left feet. Number 2, I can't remember anything. Like I have to be so focused, and that doesn't happen too often. And so, okay, I could manage it, but then they said, okay, you have to turn around. So the last row became the first row.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh my God, no. So yeah, Jasmine was done with me.
Yeah, she's like, oh. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So that's why I had to ask the question.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You mentioned that sometimes performances aren't 100%. So after a performance, do you think about that at all, or do you let it go? Or typically what happens after a show? Is there any like scrum after where you give a little review, or do you just get washed up and go home?
Usually we just like go home, go for dinner afterwards. Our director would just come back and say like, good show, and then you would kind of have a sense of like, ooh, tomorrow we're gonna get a talking to. But and then it's usually like, because like there's nothing you can do to, like, you know, if you feel like you had a good show, great, and then if the director's not happy, you know, there's nothing you can change. So we kind of leave it for the next day, and like in rehearsal we'll be like, okay, this happened, we need to work on this. And it's interesting, like some shows you feel like are so terrible, and your director will be like, that was amazing, you guys were on it, it was, yeah. And then you're like, wow, I really didn't feel good. And some shows you'll feel amazing, best show of your life, and they'll be like, not really.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting to feel like your energy and like the way you like how you feel in your body sometimes is not the way that it is perceived. And not to say that that doesn't make it good. It's just like it's a weird thing to feel like you feel on it and you feel like you did something great, and like how other people, and like also, but then you also have to tell yourself like they could be seeing it with a certain lens. They're also in their own, dealing with their own thing, and they're projecting whatever, it's
It's so
all,
subjective.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it seems that part of your training is also that mental aspect of letting that go.
Yes. Yeah. But it's hard sometimes. Like even the other day, we did a run through, and I like been working on it, and it's been really good. And when you're practicing alone, like I'm like, okay, this feels good. And then in the run through, you have too much energy or something a little bit goes off. And like within the piece, I was like, oh, I couldn't stop thinking about the thing that I kind of like didn't do the way that I wanted to do. And like within, like still, I'm still performing the piece, or we're rehearsing it in the studio, but I'm still thinking about it. And I'm like, okay, like it's done. Just let it go. Like, but yeah, it's definitely a mental practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you ever watch your film or video of yourself dancing, and what does that feel like? Does that feel like another person, or do you perform internally at the same time?
Yeah, I like watching, like as I'm doing it kind of thing, like thinking about like seeing myself from the outside. Um not actually I don't think while I'm doing it, but I can like afterwards like go back and visualize it. And definitely that's something that I do as a practice, like a visualization tool is like, okay, me doing the dance from my perspective, seeing everything, my colleagues on stage, and then doing it again and trying to like see myself from outside doing it the whole time. And it's interesting to like feel where the gaps are. And like it sometimes the gaps are like in the places that I'm having issues like physically, like trying to get the step. And so it's kind of like it's a lot of concentration to try and like buffer out those zones. But it's a good exercise. Yeah. Yeah.
And watching film of yourself?
Yes, I do that a lot.
Do you?
Yeah.
So do they record you typically in rehearsal? Oh, they do.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're doing a run through in rehearsal, we'll record it, or if we're working with someone new, we'll usually have the camera on because they'll be talking about giving a lot of information about the movement, the ideas, the imagery, and it's good for later on when we bring the piece back to have that revisit that information. But yeah, I do rewatch a lot of the videos, and I think now that I'm feeling more like comfortable in my skin, I can watch it and be like, oh, okay, great, like that I'm that's working, and like, oh, I should work on that. Whereas before I'd be like, oh my god, and I couldn't get past, like it would just not be beneficial. But now I can use that as a tool to like help myself.
Yeah, I mean, there's some actors, for example, who just cannot abide watching themselves. It
Yeah,
just
it's
makes them cringe.
it's
Yeah,
hard. Yeah,
it is hard.
yeah.
I'm curious also, morphing into your choreography career. Um, how does how do you see dance as a narrative form? I would imagine that dance allows the audience more leeway in interpretation, rather than fiction
Yeah.
or a movie or a play.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that, and how do you address that as a choreographer?
It's funny. I'm I'm choreographing a duet right now that originally I started making on myself. And there's not so much like a narrative, but there's like a theme and ideas that I want to get across. But what I'm finding is that because we humans like need to make sense of everything, that we will automatically, there will be a narrative. And so right now I have a man and a woman, and I don't want any heterosexual like romance, like that thing that when you put a man and a woman next to each other, you already make this kind of story. And so I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure out ways of creating images that can be like I want them to be the same person. And so it's interesting working with, like, I'm trying all of these things and I'm going to do my best to create what I'm trying to say, but then, you know, everyone, each individual is going to make their own story, which is not wrong, and as they should. And but it's a tricky, because we're people and we have shapes and forms, and society has, you know, we all have things that go through our head, and so to like kind of make up for that and or use that and to try and steer the narrative in a way that I want it to go, but knowing that there's only so far you can go and people are gonna make their own stories. It's interesting. It's because you're not working with objects, there's no text, it's all so subjective, like
it seems super challenging, really, if you want to do something thematic. It's, in one way, you have the stage, so no limits, but it is limiting because you only have bodies. Although I guess there's the staging element, and as a choreographer, is that part and parcel also, or is that more a director that takes that on?
I think now, definitely now, especially in contemporary dance, that's really used, like, and lighting is huge to kind of set the scene. And a choreographer that I really admire, Crystal Pite, I think she does that really well. Like, she will direct your eye to something like it's like cinema, but she's using dance and she's using bodies and people. So you see this one thing that she wants you to see, and with lighting and musicality and everything. And so it's like, it's just zoomed in, and she actually uses bodies in a way that creates this like effect. And so I think definitely the staging of it, lighting, all of that is huge. But it's a lot of like crafting, and it takes a lot of skill to be able to like kind of remove yourself, which I'm learning about.
So when you choreograph, what's your creative process?
It depends. Like, when I'm working with other dancers, I usually like to go in with like a phrase that I've created. So there's kind of like a base phrase that I'll teach, and then from there kind of morph it on their bodies, and then work with them, and then improvise with them a bit and kind of work like that. With myself, I found it very challenging because me alone in a studio, it's so easy to get distracted. And I think what I've been doing lately is I'll film myself improvising and then go back and kind of watch and take things that I find interesting and like relearn them. Because I find when I work alone and I'm trying to create a phrase, I get stuck. Because I'm like, oh, this has to mean this. Like, I really want to, this is the idea for this section. And then I feel like I have to make every movement be about that idea or theme that I'm trying to get across. And then it really stunts me. So I find if I put music on, I improvise, and then I take that out, and then I can kind of chip away at it and structure it a bit. That's kind
Editing.
Exactly.
It's like writing fiction, right?
Yeah.
You put it all out there, but you don't want to get locked in necessarily.
Yeah. So that's, and music is a huge one. I have to like have the music set before I can go forward. Yeah.
So the music comes first, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Well, first, when you are commissioned a piece, do you have something already in mind, or do you say, okay, I'll think of a duet or a core piece, or I have music? How does that work?
I think usually, if I'm commissioned, like, they'll say, I want you to do a group piece with like 10 dancers or something. And then from there, I will have to find music first before I can even imagine what it might look like. And yeah, I really have to have the music before I can even like think about where
Yeah.
I really get stuck on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And have you seen your creativity evolve as I mean, you started doing choreography a while ago now, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So has there been an evolution, do you think? Have your processes changed over time or not?
Um, I th I think the process has been kind of the same, but I think I allow myself a bit more freedom in my choices. Like when I first started, everything that had to come out had to be like, oh, I would think about it from other people's perspective. Like, are they going to like this? Like, what's the audience going to see? And I think now I kind of just go with what's inspiring me and then take a step back and then think, okay, like, is this actually saying what I want it to say? And then go back in. So I think I'm a little bit like easier on myself now. Um,
More
yeah,
confident, it sounds like.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I think, yeah. And I think I allow myself a bit more space to like not be scared of like minimal like things or like stopping and standing and not having to fill the stage with like constant movement. Yeah, which I'm liking.
It's like silence, right? It can have a lot of power
Yeah,
just being still.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
I think as humans, as you say, we just like filling in the blanks, but sometimes the blank is what's vital.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have themes that you want to explore in the future?
Um, right now I'm the theme that I'm kind of dealing with the duet that I'm making is not to like and I talk about it and I think because it came out of lockdown and just having time with my thoughts and realizing things and being more self-aware and so like kind of that realization of um just like the everyday and like kind of this stopping and realizing, oh, okay, this is how I process things. This is how I interact with the world. When I'm dancing, it was just a different kind of brain, I think, because I'm dealing with things physically that kind of like allow me to kind of process things. And then not having that physical outlet, then my brain is just like, oh my God. So it's and not one is not better than the other. It just was fascinating to notice the change. And so I think I'm like trying to get into that area, but it's hard because it's like hard to tell people about it without like revealing all your secrets. Like there's so many like I'm like I want to tell you the things that I'm interested in like when people ask about what the piece is about, but then without being like I went through this and this is like word for word like my diary or something. So it's like
Right.
it's interesting to like navigate like a subject with like and how much you want to kind of divulge about like your personal experience, which I guess is the way art is, but
But I guess, yeah, I think that's the creative challenge, like for any artist in any
yeah,
field, I guess, to a certain degree, that how much of your intimate self are you prepared to give?
yeah,
And I guess the reverse is that people might assume
right, yeah,
intimate things
that aren't
when that you have never had any intention,
it's
right?
true, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's always that
It's like a yeah,
messiness.
yeah. But it's funny because when I'm dancing, I don't have that reservation. Like
Mm.
I guess like I mean it's just different because I don't have to like actually like articulate it through like it's just through my body. So it's yeah. But
Oh,
choreographing, I
interesting.
have to share a certain amount with the dancers and like talking about the
Mhm.
piece and Yeah, so it's like another, yeah.
So in a way, it's a more intimate thing because it's well, you're the originator, so I guess there's that feeling like how much how much vulnerability do you think is that the issue?
Yeah, or I guess like, yeah,
Or ownership of the idea?
I think the ownership, yeah, which is like a whole new thing because, yeah.
It is a big deal. I
Yeah,
mean, when something is debuted, you'd have to speak to reporters and
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So it's a different way, yeah, a different way of taking ownership of, yeah, my ideas and yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, because you have to articulate them other than dance, in
yeah,
ways other than dance.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. The other thing I want is like a really basic question, but from someone with no experience or knowledge of dance. How do you choreograph? There's dance notation, right?
yeah.
Is what does that look like? I
I
mean, obviously generally, because like how do you
yeah,
convey choreography?
it there is a like formalized dance notation that people learn, and now that video has come about, I think it's a good friend of mine. She was studying it and she was so curious about it because now that we have video, it's just like it's faster. It's yeah, and that was easier to do when like it was a set ballet and but now that contemporary dance, like each person's interpretation is like different. So how do you notate that and keep track? But video, I think for me, I think when I'm writing, I had to teach choreography to another company. Um, and so for my own notes, I would write down like the counts and what they would do. And I would kind of find some words I would shortcut and like, but it was pretty much just like, yeah, word for word. But I think video, it's really just yeah, the fastest.
Cut to the chase, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I keep track, like in my notebook, I write down like music and the eighths and like all that. But I need like every rehearsal, I'm just filming them or filming myself, and it's yeah. Thank God for the the phone. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. That would, I imagine, also enhance dance too, having that ability, because before you wouldn't have that flexibility. And as you say, a phone, right? Whereas 10 years ago,
yeah,
taking film was a big deal in
yeah,
terms of setup.
yeah, yeah. And I like imagine like if when people used to have to teach from reading dance notation and it's like human error, like if they read that wrong or someone wrote it down off, like then it starts to change and evolve, and it's yeah, which is kind of fascinating. But yeah, I think when you can watch, especially when we get pieces in and we watch like other companies perform it and we learn from that video, it's like so helpful to see like, okay, that's how they're interpreting, that's what it's just yeah.
By the way, that was so fascinating about the notation, because I just don't know how dance is scored, and
Yeah,
especially with the counts and the
I
music and
know. Yeah, but it's interesting because like obviously music, there's a score, there's notes and everything, but like dance is so it's just evolving so fast. And yeah, it's yeah, I wonder what would have happened if there wasn't video.